the footage that everybody is seeing being looped over and over is very short, but let's play it. I don't think it's any sound. We can play it as we talk. Let me see. Actually, it might be like an explosion sound. Oh no, there isn't. So this is what everybody's talking about, and I'll read the caption here in just a second.
Yeah,
this is from Carl Za. Drone attack on Kremlin, which Russia said was assassination attempt on Putin. We're entertaining no holds barred stage of war. This will not end well for Ukraine or the West. That's Carl Zahn, friend of the show, also friend of the network. Your initial thoughts on the story in general, just the overall story, and just to be specific, you're not here in a sort of a reporting capacity on this story. You're just here giving your opinions, because it's it's still a lot that needs to develop and needs to come out before we can really develop opinions. But what is sort of your reaction to the story, the overall story?
Can we explain to people who he is, because not everybody may be aware.
Sure. Okay, let's do that first.
So TD Jakes is a pastor. He is a pastor of one of those mega churches. So his church is huge, right? He's on TV, like he's a pastor of one of those churches that is on television. So just to give you an idea, he's written multiple books, yada, yada, yada. And he's made a lot of money off of this. Okay, so similar to some of the other TV, we used to call them televangelists, Joel Osteen, same thing, Creflo Dollar, like they're pastors at these mega churches.
Yeah, and TD Jakes has even been in Tyler Perry movies. He's been on with Oprah, and so go to the black community and ask anybody who TD Jakes is. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, I know who he is."
Right.
A lot of white people know who he is too, but So with these televangelists, I already have a problem with them from the outset. I know a lot of us do, especially those of us who are more anti-capitalist, because these televangelists typically have a reputation of, pulling money out of people, especially people who don't have it, and using the premise of God will bless you if you give me money, when in reality, God's blessing you because you got the money in your account already. Why are you giving this to somebody who actually doesn't need it? I'm gonna be good, but that's the type of person that TD Jakes is. Yes, Ricky Jones. Yes.
Yeah. And they make a lot of money, like a lot of money off of this. So that's just something just to keep in mind.
Yeah. So, should I start off with the first TikTok video? Because the thing is, the only thing I'm nervous about the TikTok video is that it shows a clip of the CBS News. That's the only thing I'm a little bit afraid of.
Is it CBS Morning? Is that the name of the show? I think I've shown that show before. We should be fine with that.
We should. Okay. All right. Just being careful, because I don't want us to get, a copyright claim. Okay. So basically, there's an unholy alliance that's happening. So let's take a look at what it is.
It's something.
Damn right.
Fargo is committing to up to $1 billion to fund these projects, pay for is the way we put it. That's not a donation, right? That's an investment. No. They want to make money off it.
Well, no, it's not. I don't know what they want to do, but it's not a donation. It's a commitment to supporting initiatives to raise up communities that have been repressed.
So he's talking about allying himself with Wells Fargo Bank. That's what he's referring about. So.
Was Wells Fargo your only option on this, or what made you comfortable with Wells Fargo? And the reason I ask that is, they have a recent history. In fact, just in December, they paid a $3.7 billion fine to settle accusations of illegal overdraft fees, illegal fees tied to car loans, illegal fees tied to mortgages. This is money they were taking out of the pockets of low-income people that you're trying to help now.
Right, and that's exactly the reservations that I had with them as well. Initially, several years ago, when they talked to me, I would not do business with them for those very reasons. That settlement that came out came from the previous administration. They have a new leader now. They have a new administration, and they're beginning to right some of the wrongs. This is not going to right it all at once, but it is a start toward justifying and rectifying some of the mistakes that have been made previously. The other reason is when other banks stood back and looked, Wells Fargo stood up and said, you know, I'm willing to make this unlikely alliance, this very unique alliance. I've written a book called Disruptive Thinking, and this disruptive alliance between us is designed to lift up underserved, underrepresented communities.
What do you get out of this, Bishop? Being
No. Wells Fargo would not be engaged in this at all if there wasn't something in it for them. They would not be engaged in this at all if they're not profiting off of it in some way, shape, or form. They are a bank.
Yeah.
They're a bank. Wells Fargo was one of the banks that was complicit with stealing people's homes during the housing crisis in 2008. Wells Fargo was a part of that. You have an echo coming on your end, JB. Wells Fargo was a part of that, guys. I just want to make that very clear. They were one of the banks that was stealing homes from Black elders during the 2008 housing crisis, the subprime mortgage crisis. And yet TD Jakes feels comfortable working with them. We can go back to the video because she does ask him, what is he getting out of it? And I think that's important as well.
Of this, Bishop, being involved in this partnership?
First and primary thing for me is legacy. You know, it's a legacy piece for me. I want to give back. I want to do something for people who have been loyal and faithful to me and people that I know and love. Right. The second thing that I get out of it is knowing that we have headed off a collision. That the stats say that by 2050, the average median income for Black people is going to be zero. And so we have got to get in front of this with STEAM, with technology, with job creation, with entrepreneurship.
I declare, honey.
Pause. I'm sorry. He's giving incorrect information. So when he talks about 2050, when he talks about what the income, the median income is going to be for Black people in 2050, he said $0. He has his vocabulary mixed up. The net worth for Black people in 2050 is predicted to be $0, not the income. Those are two different things. The income, your income is what you earn. That's your hourly wage, your salary wage, etc. Your net worth is what you own minus what you owe. They're not the same thing. And he sat right there on CBS Mornings. They did not correct him because they probably don't even know, but that doesn't even make any sense. If you think about it, how is the income going to be zero? Like, that doesn't make sense. So that's incorrect information. And then two, the other thing that he said when she asked him, like, what is he going to get out of it? He said legacy. I get to give back to the community is what he said. He can give back to the community without partnering with Wells Fargo. You don't need to do that. Rome gives back to the community doing tour for the poor. He's not partnered with Wells Fargo. Do you see what I'm saying? This is a scam. Go ahead, JB. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That information was incorrect.
No, you're absolutely right. And the fact is that it's like, what is TD Jakes getting out of it? Money. Like, Why in the hell else do you get into another business venture with somebody? Like, there is really, it's very simple. And the fact is that you got a lot of people who go, well, he's just trying to give back to the community. How do you give back to the community by like earning millions more dollars off of it? How do you get him giving back? It doesn't make sense to me. So, and they actually talk about TD Jakes' different corporations and nonprofits. Yes, he actually owns corporations and nonprofits.
Yep.
And I'll get into that. Yeah. Soul Construct. I'm sorry. TD Jakes is getting paid for his Gulfstream jet. Yeah. Basically, you know,
just another way for him to make more money. That's what this is about. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You got to partner with a bank to give back to the community.
Does that make sense? Wait, hang on. Ask that question again.
About the legacy?
Yeah, ask that question again.
She said, yeah, she asked him, she said, what are you getting out of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the thing is, like, do you really need to partner with a bank to give back?
No, you don't. Take some of those donations that he gets from his church and use some of those donations to give back to the community instead of like helping fill his pockets. We'll talk about this in a sec. I'll get into the whole thing about the black church and the money, and I'll get into all that. But go ahead and finish the video, JB.
Gotcha.
What a disgrace. Not this Wells Fargo, the same that was sued for racial discrimination in mortgage lending practices. The federal lawsuit says that Wells Fargo discriminated against Black and Latino homebuyers in Sacramento, California by pushing them into more expensive mortgages than white borrowers. So according to these lawsuits, Wells Fargo allegedly infringed on Black people and Latino people by pushing them into more expensive mortgages than white people. But when they weren't doing that, they rejected half of their Black applicants in mortgage refinancing boom. Same Wells Fargo, in 2020, they agreed to pay $3 billion to resolve criminal and civil investigations into sales practices involving the opening of millions of accounts without customer authorization. They were also charging people excessive amounts of overdraft fees, different type of fees, all kinds of things. And also, a Wells Fargo loan officer said in an affidavit that employees had referred to Black people as mud people and also called their loans ghetto loans. So Wells Fargo is going to make $1 billion investment into the community that they once took advantage of instead of it being a donation. And TD Jakes is also going to make money with the company that did things like this. Players, let me know what you're thinking about.
Yeah. Just another way for him to make more money. Like this, it's embarrassing, I think, to the Black community. Listen, like, even if you did decide to partner with a bank, why not partner with a credit union, right? Why a large bank like Wells Fargo? I really hope people don't fall for this, JB. You're muted.
I was going to say, given the history of Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo has a long history, and it's not good. And I got some of the history already. TD Jakes should be ashamed of himself. And I am not mincing my words. As a Black man, no self-respecting Black person would get behind Wells Fargo. I'm going to say that right there. No self-respecting Black person would align themselves with Wells Fargo in that manner. No. If you know the history about Wells Fargo, you'll be like, who the hell does this man think he is? Now,
Well, it's just like at the end of the day, TD Jakes is just another capitalist.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the day.
So I have a couple of articles actually. The first one is an op-ed that was written. Ew, get out of here. Okay, so let me make sure this is big enough. So this is an opinion article. It says we shouldn't buy Bishop TD Jakes' claim that Wells Fargo has changed its ways, because the bank has paid billions of dollars to settle claims that it has discriminated against or otherwise taken advantage of its customers. Look at that suit. Just look at the suit. You know that. Look, how many rent payments he could have helped people out with just for that suit alone.
Yep.
Anywho, let me go on. Okay, so it says Bishop T.D. Jakes, arguably the most well-known Black religious leader in the United States, and whose Dallas church, the Potter's House, ranks among the country's largest congregations, has announced a new 10-year deal between T.D. Jakes' group and Wells Fargo to build mixed-income communities in underserved neighborhoods. Bullshit. Even though the partnership is not with his church, Jakes is still best known as a pastor and in working with a financial institution that's been repeatedly accused of racist lending practices. Jakes will likely be hurting Black community he says he wants to help. Indeed, his partnership with Wells Fargo is tantamount to his working with the fox to raid the hen house. Why? Says, well, for almost 20 years, Wells Fargo has had an abysmal record in the African-American community regarding mortgages and loans. According to federal prosecutors, starting 4 years before the 2008 financial crisis that had caused the Great Recession, Wells Fargo, the fourth largest bank in the United States, discriminated by steering approximately 4,000 African-American and Hispanic wholesale borrowers, as well as additional retail borrowers, into subprime mortgages when non-Hispanic white borrowers with similar credit profiles received prime loans. And then this is going to be important because you have people out there in Baltimore, Sabby. It says Baltimore city officials complained that at the time, Wells Fargo policies had pushed hundreds of borrowers into that city into foreclosure. So the thing is that somebody like, you know, TD Jakes getting with Wells Fargo, it's, you might as well be partnering with the KKK, in my opinion.
There you go.
And that is not hyperbole when I get to the history. It's not hyperbole at all. And so this is just bad on its face. In fact, just to give you guys a little bit of background, there is another article, and this one is actually out of the New York Times that I'm going to share with you guys. So this is out of the New York Times. It says, bank accused of pushing mortgage deals on Blacks. This is out of 2009. It says, as she describes it, Beth Jacobson and her fellow loan officers at Wells Fargo Bank rode the stagecoach from hell for a decade, systematically singling out Blacks in Baltimore and suburban Maryland for high-interest subprime mortgages. These loans, Baltimore officials have claimed in a federal lawsuit against Wells Fargo, tipped hundreds of homeowners into foreclosure and cost the city tens of millions of dollars in taxes and city services. Wells Fargo, Mrs. Jacobson said in an interview, saw the Black community as fertile ground for subprime mortgages, as working class Blacks were hungry to be part of the nation's home owning mania. Loan officers, she said, push customers who have qualified for prime loans into subprime mortgages. Another loan officer stated that in an affidavit last week that employees had referred to Blacks as mud people and subprime lending as ghetto loans. So what this lady on the TikTok video said was absolutely true. And the thing is that this is the type of bank that Wells Fargo is that they are a racist with a history of racism institution.
Yep. And that's who he chose to partner with.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll read this last paragraph here. It says, for 4 years, Later in 2012, Wells Fargo was ordered to pay by the Justice Department $175 million to settle allegations that it discriminated against African American and Hispanic borrowers between 2004 and 2009. Wells Fargo denied that it had actually discriminated against, in a statement said that, quote, "We at Wells Fargo are settling this matter solely for the purpose of avoiding contested litigation with the Department of Justice," end quote. The $175 million included $125 million to borrowers who were discriminated against and $50 million in direct down payment assistance to borrowers in communities around the country where the department identified large numbers of discrimination victims and which were hard hit by the housing crisis. So, you know, when you talk about Wells Fargo, it just goes deep. And there's more to this article that I want to get into, and then I'll get into some of the history of Wells Fargo as well. It is very gritty, and I'm gonna be honest with you. When I get into the history of Wells Fargo, some of you guys may not want to continue to watch this stream because it is going to get gritty. I'm just going to let you guys know that right now. All right, so it says in 2018, the National Black Church Initiative, a coalition of 150,000 African Americans and Latino churches that fight racial disparities, announced nationwide boycott of Wells Fargo because that history of pushing subprime loans on Black people. But complaints against the bank didn't end. In a class action lawsuit filed in California in April 2022, Wells Fargo was once again accused of racist lending. According to plaintiffs in that class action lawsuit, Black loan applicants with high credit scores were giving interest rates that were higher than white loan applicants with high credit scores.
Yep.
And then let's get into this. As despite what the company says in its statements about its commitment to fair hiring practices and fair lending practices, there appears to be a pattern with Wells Fargo, one that the National Black Church Initiative thought was troubling enough to call for a boycott. Why then is Jakes partnering with a lender that has an abysmal record with the communities he says he wants to serve? As in April 27th appearance with CBS Mornings, he announced his partnership. Jakes was asked about the illegal overdraft fees, illegal fees tied to car loans, illegal fees tied to mortgages that led to a $3.7 billion settlement with the CFPB. He said that those bad practices were, quote, exactly the reservations that I had with them as well. Initially, several years ago, when they talked to me, I would not do business with them for those very reasons, end quote. As Jake said, the settlement came out of years from previous administration. They have a new leader now. So just because they have a new leader, quote unquote, then it's all good now. Sabi, do you buy that?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. Like, this is, again, it just, for me, it's problematic. I don't care if they have a new leader. There were other banks he could have gone to if he wanted to partner with the bank. You see what I mean? Like, why didn't you reach out to any of the credit unions? You know, why did you reach out to a Black bank?
Yeah.
Why not that? Like, why would you? Only because you have something to gain from it, right? This is why he has something to gain for it. This is not just about him trying to help out the Black community. I don't buy that for one bit, because it was just about that. Then you wouldn't be partnering with someone like Wells Fargo. He's getting something out of this deal, and they're getting something out of this deal.
And the thing is that one of the things that I, think that, him doing this, and he doesn't care about the Black community as much as he claims he does, because he's not a stupid person. TD Jakes is a smart man. And the thing is that he knows where his bread is buttered. And so he's going after this just from a purely capitalistic standpoint.
That's right.
Now, Jakes has pointed out that Wells Fargo is partnering with TD Jakes Group, not the Porterhouse's church. According to news release, TD Jakes Group includes TD Jakes Real Estate Ventures, TD Jakes Enterprises, and in TD Jakes Foundation. TD Jakes Real Estate Venture has purchased about 100 acres at Fort McPherson outside of Atlanta that will be the first part of a mixed income community Jakes intends to build. And then it says Jake's description of Wells Fargo makes it sound as if a lender has an altruistic motivation. But for a lender with such an abysmal history with Black people, this partnership with Jake's gives Wells Fargo legitimacy.
See? Because there are people who are like, who really like TD Jakes, and they'll say, well, if TD Jakes is, you know, working with them, they must be okay now.
Yeah. And so, you know, this is just really, you know, we all know what this is about. And this last paragraph I'll read, it says, when a reporter on CBS Mornings asked Jakes what he's getting out of the partnership, he said, first, one primary thing for me is legacy. You know, it's a legacy piece for me. I want to give back. I want to do something for the people who have been loyal and faithful to me instead of God, and people that I know and love, right? But the article says, but the legacy of prosperity pastors, and Jakes is one of the most prominent, is the problem. The marriage of conservative Christian values and finance is an old story, and it often does not turn out well. In the past, we've seen well-meaning believers get fleeced by pastors touting financial freedom. This is the prosperity gospel in action. The prosperity never seems to reach the people who need it. It says TD Jakes had a long record, has long regarded himself as a successful businessman, and he obviously is. But by entering a partnership with a company with such a racist history, the country's most visible Black preacher put himself in a questionable company. I think it's beyond questionable to me, to be honest with you.
He's able to overlook it because, again, at the end of the day, he's just trying to find another way to make more money. So he's able to just overlook that. And it's crazy, you know, and we've talked about this before, right? Like the issue that we've had with, and not all, but someone like the black church, and this idea that like you're supposed to come to church and you're supposed to pay tithe, and then it's like if you don't have money for tithe one Sunday, then you're kind of, people look at you kind of funny, like, oh, you know, you're supposed to give at least 10% of your income and to tithe and all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, like some of these pastors of these, well, no, all the pastors of the mega churches are making bank, and you have people that are part of the congregation that are trying to figure out if they're going to be able to pay rent next month. Meanwhile, the pastor is pulling up to the church in like a BMW or a Mercedes, has a private jet, has a huge house. The church doesn't pay any taxes. And you giving all your, you know, giving what you're supposed to, you're told you're supposed to the church, is supposed to go to the church. But at the same time, you have some of these pastors like living like celebrities. And it's just a slap in the face to me, because if it's really supposed to be about giving back, and if they always continue to say that, like, you know, the Bible, Jesus says, come as you are don't mean come with money. Like, I'm sorry, but that's not what that means. And I just feel like that idea of the Black church, it got away from what it used to be, which was giving back to the community. This is not to say they don't do any type of charity. I'm sure that they do. But anytime the pastor, this goes back to the issue we have with the billionaires. Anytime the pastor got all of this, and you got people in the congregation that have very little, that's a problem.
Yeah. And my thing is that you're already being exploited at work, and now you're being exploited at the place where you worship.
Can I just explain to people, for people who did not grow up in the church, you guys have to understand, like I grew up in the church, you grew up in the church. Like, it wasn't like you just went to church on Sunday. No. You went to church on Sunday, and then we had Bible study, which was on Wednesday. Then if you were, when I was younger, I was part of the youth, you know, the youth group. So then there was the meetings for the youth group. Every time you walked through that building, you gave money. You gave money during Bible study. You gave money on Sunday for Sunday service. And you gave money when you went to like those youth meetings.
Now, for me, it was different because I was I belong to Jehovah's Witnesses, and so they didn't pass around, you know, the plate or anything like that. It was all supposed to be voluntary donation. So they had boxes in the back, and then you just gave of, you know, what you could. So it wasn't as bad, but they still have that organization still made millions. But the thing is that for Sabby, yes, I had the Sunday meeting, then I had Tuesday book study, then on Thursday it was the Theocratic Ministry School of Service meeting. Then on Saturdays we had to get up early and we had to go door to door preaching. And so it was that. Not to mention the circuit assemblies, the special day assemblies, and the district conventions.
Yeah, don't forget about the conventions.
All that too.
And you have to pay to go to those conventions. And then another thing is, if you don't really have the money to pay to go to the conventions, then another thing would happen. Like, they would try to make people feel bad because they weren't going. And it's just kind of like, look, either you have the money to go or you don't have the money to go. And that was another thing that just kind of like rubbed me the wrong way. It was just like, why do you have to do all of this? Like, every time I turn around, you asking for more money. Yeah. And I don't really see any improvements on this building. This building still looked the same as it did when I first started coming here. So where's the money going? And these are questions that I always had. Anytime you got the pastor living in this huge house, fancy cars, living like celebrities, and then the people in the congregation living in apartments. And I feel like people just wouldn't push back on this. People wouldn't push back because they were like, you know, they don't want to be shamed. They don't want to be, they don't want them to make them feel like bad for asking those questions. But you should ask those questions. When I give you tithes on Sunday, where is that money going?
Look, if you're a religious person, God gave you a brain. God gave you a brain to ask these questions too. Because look, if it's okay for Jesus to go to the scribes and Pharisees and call them hypocrites and offspring of vipers, you don't think it is not godly to tell people at TD Jakes to his face who he is? I'm sorry, but you're doing the same thing that Jesus did. Like, look, if y'all want to get religious, we can do it. All right? Because this is the same person. Jesus was the same guy that said, hey, look, if you got a poor person among you, you put that person in the front. You put that person and you prop the poor person up over everybody else. Because that person is the person that you guys need to be serving the most, is the people who are the most needy. And the thing is that they're not Christian. Look, if you believe in Christianity, TD Jakes is not a Christian. Look, I said what I said. I said what I said. He's not. None of those people who enslaved us were Christians back then. They just used the religion of Christianity and the Bible to keep us enslaved.
He's a businessman, JB. He's a businessman. Anytime you take Christianity and you make it a business, this guy has like best-selling books, and he's not alone. Like, again, it's not just him. It's also Joel. What's Joel Osteen or whatever? He's a fake one.
You mean the man that likes to smile all the time, and he has a friendly Southern accent when he looks at you with the little twinkle in his eye?
I'm just like, this guy he just comes across, you know, as an actor to me. But it's just, you have to be you got to be careful. You really got to be careful about these types of things. But at the end of the day, it's like they're just capitalists. Like, yeah, they may, you know, preach about the Bible and things like that, but they try to make money off of it. It's like, you know, I'm sorry, but when it gets to the point where you have private jets.
Look, people like Joel Osteen and TD Jakes would have been the same people that Jesus would have chased out of the church, the temple. I'm just being real. And there's a lot of people who are in different religions. You know, Mormon church. He would have did the same thing to them.
Creflo Dollar. His last name was Dollar.
Creflo Dollar. Good
and
Lord.
I'm like, people really like buy into, you know, it's just at some point or another, you just have to look back and like take a look around. It's like, do you think that's morally okay? Do you think it's morally okay for the pastor of the congregation to have a private jet?
Like, yeah, no. And also, just to get back into the whole thing about
there's a second TikTok vid if you got it.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Let me get into that because I was going to read this history of, but that gritty stuff, I'll excuse me, I'll save for a second.
A brother in Christ is back in the news today, and it's not for what he thinks. So CBS Morning News announced that TD Jakes Group and Wells Fargo are announcing a 10-year partnership to build inclusive communities. TD Jakes stated, and I quote, "We're the people we've been waiting for," who details his mixed income communities could provide for residents. And of course, you know, is not having it. So this person had tweeted and said, the same Wells Fargo that denied 53% of Black mortgage applicants? The same Wells Fargo that charges Black clients, including those with higher credit scores, an average higher interest rates of 3.34% compared to 3.23% for white borrowers? Yes, honey, that same Wells Fargo. Someone else has said in 2012, Wells Fargo was sued for discrimination. In 2016, 2019, 2020, and 2022. And of course, in 2023. And one lawsuit filed in February involving claims by a Georgia resident, Chris Williams, that the bank had tried to charge him a higher interest rate for his credit score warranted when he looked to refinance his home in 2019. After his attorneys got word of that, they're going to file a class action lawsuit against Wells Fargo in 2023. Reverend Mrs. Mommy says racist and corrupt corporations and politicians always go to Black churches to do their dirty work and get their foot in the door. Don't trust them. Stay away from Wells Fargo. Another person has said this. The irony is that TD Jakes has partnered with a bank that called Black folks mud people, plus served them ghetto loans in Baltimore and other cities. He goes on to say that this project is being completed in my old hood, which is the zip code at the time was the #1 for mortgage fraud in America. Somebody else said, sigh. First, anything involving Wells Fargo and Black people raises a red flag. Also, is TD Jakes auditioning to be the Black face of gentrification? Mixed-use houses often leaves out many poor and working-class Black folks. This is suspect. Wells Fargo, my brother in Christ. And probably my favorite tweet. Somebody said this. Wells Fargo and the man behind the shade room are working together. This is about to be the most exploitative financial program built after Jay-Z and his crypto camp. And I couldn't agree more.
There you go. Shale said, please hit the like button for Sabby and JB. This episode is so important to me. I lost my home in 2008. See?
Oh my gosh, Shale. I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Yeah, there are real people behind this, man.
Yeah.
Joey Nichols said, how about when Jesus told Creflo Dollar to ask for his flock to buy him a $65 million plane? Now that was classic. Oh my God.
I'm telling you.
Look, let me show y'all what Wells Fargo is. Viewer discretion advised, by the way.
Hold on to your seats for this one.
Okay. It says African Americans boycott Wells Fargo with their slave masters' history. As Wells Fargo, the bank is one of the oldest and largest banks in the United States, dating back over 170 years of doing banking business nationwide and internationally. Wells Fargo was funded by Henry Williams and William G. Fargo in March 18, 1852, in conjunction with many successful financial investors and realtors who had background and heritage in the ownership of Black slaves and indentured Native American servants. Wells Fargo Bank was also in the business of shipping goods from the East Coast to the West to supply provisions such as food, materials, medicine, manpower to all mining camps throughout the West Coast and the Northern California region. More so, one of the top goods and commodities distributed and shipped by Wells Fargo Bank were Native American indentured servants, Chinese illegal immigrants, and most important of all, their shipping cargo was the slave Negro man and Negro woman. Yes, the most powerful bank in America was involved in transporting slaves across the entire United States before emancipation and after the end of slavery. Indeed, Wells Fargo made a fortune during the period of the gold rush between 1849 and 1870 with the delivery of valuable documents, gold dust, tools, dynamite, food, water, etc. But the majority of their wealth came from issuing loans and grants to companies, plantation owners, and slave owners in order to increase the gold rush producing economy by providing the necessary money to slaveholders to be able to purchase more slaves and indigent servants to work the mines in the lands, as well as using black female slaves and Indian American women servants as entertainment and actual stress release to the white men working long hours in the mines and plantation farms. It says, yes, Black America, your favorite bank was a sponsor of slave terrorism, grape, I got to be careful, child, trafficking, hanging, lynching, beating, killing of blacks, male and female slaves at the hands of slave masters and gold miners who used Wells Fargo Bank money and transportation delivery systems to usher decades of centuries of white supremacy on your black ancestors who were slaves against their will and who were treated worse than any other slave culture around the world. So I'm going to tell you this. You know how, Sabby, when you were talking about JP Morgan and their association with Jeffrey Epstein?
Yep.
Well, this is that same thing on steroids.
Yep. And JP Morgan's history isn't good either.
No. So, and I haven't even gotten to the gritty parts of it yet, but it's bad. So it says, equally important, Wells Fargo was used by thousands of white slave masters and white, you see the word, to send and receive messages about new arrivals and or sale of new black slaves and indentured servants via the use of Wells Fargo stagecoach, also known as the Butterfield Line. In 1857, Wells Fargo formed the Overland Mail Company that will then become part of the mail delivery system among slave owners, businesses, owners, child, etc., who will communicate about the availability of new black slaves and their so-called famous alligator babies, who are black babies between the ages of 2 months to 2 years old, who were stolen from black slaves by racist white men who work at the slave plantations to be used as bait and to hunt and catch alligators.
Yep. See, this is the kind of information that, like, your history textbooks is not going to tell you this. They're not going to tell you that part about slavery. They tell you the sugar-coated part. Yeah.
So the thing is that, yes, they used to use children, toddlers, infants and toddlers as bait for alligators.
Yep.
So this is why when black people talk about things like slavery, when we talk about things like reparations, this is the type of atrocities we're talking about, right? And the thing is that when it comes to atrocities, it's not some Olympics where we're trying to win as atrocities. But think about this. We're 13% of the population today. Shouldn't we be more?
Yeah, because it wasn't always that way in this country, especially during slavery.
Yeah. So if that being the case, Wells Fargo being one of the banks that are behind this type of genocide, not, shame on TD Jakes. Shame on him. So that's the problem,
And the thing is, the the banks participated. Like even when you talk, like you were saying with the slave trade, the banks participated. And then even after slavery ended, those same banks discriminated against Black people. And Wells Fargo was still discriminating against Black people this year. Like, it's not like that went away. That's the thing. That's the problem. And he's choosing to partner with them. This is not about him. Oh, okay, they have a new owner. They have a new owner, so I'm okay now. No, this is about money.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, my legacy to help out the people who've been loyal to me. Loyal to him? Is he God?
You caught that too.
The weirdest thing I've ever seen. The people who've been loyal to me. What?
Yeah. It's wild.